When it comes to fictional fears, I've always been captivated by the fundamental nature that makes something truly terrifying, whether it's the weeping angels and our instinctive fear of the unknown, or Pennywise feeding off our most traumatic fears. But Hereditary did something completely different. It wasn't Paimon alone that captivated me, it was the effect this demon had on the people around him. The way this Demon King Paimon, one of 8 kings of hell, sought to manifest into our world through weakening the psyche of the Graham family by inflicting tragedy after tragedy upon them, with every event gradually but relentlessly ripping them apart. That's the most compelling aspect of Paimon. As he gets closer and closer to his goal of possessing Peter, we realise that he was never able to physically hurt them because he couldn't fully access their bodies. Paimon could only access the most vulnerable host, which meant he had to break his victims down psychologically before he could torture them physically. You can see the precise moment Annie's mind literally breaks when she watches her husband Steve burn alive. Then and only then can Paimon fully access her body and eventually force her to cut her own head off. The same is true for Peter. Paimon couldn't claim his coveted male host until he'd forced the most twisted and traumatising images of his parents onto Peter's mind to completely break it. Only once a victim is completely hollowed out of their humanity can Paimon claim them as a host. I think this quintessentially reflects what makes Paimon such a terrifying villain. He can't physically destroy his victims until they're mentally broken, so he does both instead. Just look at how nefariously he puppets the Grahams, sowing seeds of distrust into the fabric of the family from the very beginning, when he influenced Annie to sleepwalk into Charlie and Peter's room, dousing him in paint thinner and waking up just after striking a match. Ever since that moment, one of the most fundamental building blocks of a family was completely shattered: their trust. Peter could never trust his mum again from that moment on, which caused a chain reaction of self-destruction for years to come. It's almost as if Paimon is so manipulative and evil that he doesn't need to completely break people himself. He plants seeds that force a family to destroy themselves. You can see the gradual deterioration of the Grahams as the story unfolds, with Peter and Annie hearing more and more of Charlie's cluck noises, unbeknownst to them symbolic of Paimon, as they gradually lose their minds. It's not uncommon for films to use the paranormal as a medium to drive a character insane, whether it's no one believing the victim, or just general paranormal activity driving them insane. But this is the first time I've seen a paranormal villain command such brutality by pitting the family up against themselves. Even if some of the work is the cult's doing, Paimon skips so much of the generic paranormal jump scare antics by showing us the family rip themselves apart, which makes the tragedy of Hereditary and the evil of Paimon so much more real. And you can see the absolute epitome of their anguish during Annie's outburst at dinner, in what was for me one of the best scenes of the film, when Annie accuses Peter of being so full of disdain and resentment that he simply cannot take responsibility for anything. There's always been this rift in their relationship since Paimon planted the seed of terror in Peter, that his own mum unconsciously wanted him dead, or even worse, never wanted him in the first place. And this deep-seated resentment erupts when they both blame each other for what happened to Charlie. Paimon essentially makes the first and last move of this horrifying game, planting the initial seed of distrust within the family and then inflicting one final blow so gut-wrenchingly horrifying it would break any mind, let alone one already weakened by years of torture. Whether it's Steve burning alive right in front of Annie, or Annie slicing her own head off right in front of Peter. It's almost as though Paimon had to make room for his own vessel by relentlessly breaking down fundamental fragments that make a person who they are, numbing their very humanity in order to hollow them out until all that's left is a lifeless host, primed for Paimon's bidding. But the irony of Annie's outburst is that she pleads with Peter to take some responsibility, when in reality it doesn't matter what he did, it doesn't matter what any of them did. Their fates were already sealed the day Ellen summoned Paimon from the spirit world. It's just another thread that adds to the fear factor of Paimon. Beyond the pain and destruction he caused the family, what makes Paimon even more terrifying is that the Graham family were doomed from the very start. They never had a chance of stopping him in the first place. The tragedy of Hereditary and the terrifying nature of King Paimon is perfectly summarised early on in the film, when Peter's class discusses Heracles, the mythological figure whose life was prophesied as a complete certainty, and we're left to wonder if that makes it more or less tragic. Bridget turns to look at Peter the moment a classmate answers. I think it's more tragic, because if it's all inevitable, the characters have no hope. They never had hope. They're like hopeless pawns in this horrible hopeless machine. That's exactly what the Grahams are in the face of Paimon. Nothing more than hopeless pawns at the mercy of this insidious demon. It's a sentiment only further solidified by the constant shots of their household that paint them out to be diorama in Paimon's own hellish game. Take the opening shot of the movie. It's the perfect lens to view Paimon through as the camera pans from Annie's diorama and transitions into a real shot of Peter's room. It's a shot we see repeatedly throughout the film that reminds us just how powerful Paimon's spirit is. Taking the responsibility away from the Graham family, that there's nothing they really could have done in the wake of this otherworldly beast, just adds to the malicious nature of Paimon. That the moment he sunk his vicious claws into Charlie, they are already destined to suffer unimaginably. It's the brutality of Paimon, combined with the inevitability of his triumph, that makes for one of the most chilling scenes I've ever witnessed. Annie's final moments, as she's suspended in mid-air with her eyes fixated on Peter, gradually but gruelingly slicing her own head off. Even though she's possessed by Paimon, you can see the sheer terror in her eyes. Her facial expression is in complete contrast to the deadpan soulless look she had when watching her husband burn alive just moments before. Here you can see the horror in the realisation and acceptance of her fate, that she believes it was her actions that led to this demon into their lives. It gives off the horrifying concept that she's still in there, somewhere, merely watching in a void she can't escape, doomed to witness the triumph of this demon that rips her family apart. It's one of the most compelling and gripping moments I've ever seen in this type of horror film that depicts the monumental tragedy of an innocent family being ripped apart by evil in one single moment in time. It's so much more chilling and unsettling than 1,000 jump scares. It's one of those scenes that sticks with you for years to come and almost defines the horror genre for me. And it's all the result of this Demon King Paimon manifesting into our world. There's something so tragic about an innocent family being preyed upon and ripped apart by pure evil for some nefarious gain. Their sacrifice is almost always considered an honour by the persecutors, which makes it even more twisted, just as Ellen writes in her final letter to Annie when she tells her not to despair for her losses, that she'll see in the end they were worth it. Their sacrifice will pale next to the rewards. These haunting words completely contrast the triumph of summoning this evil demon into this world with the outright butchering of an innocent family. The effect Paimon has on the cult, their pure devotion to his summoning, is almost as unsettling as his own evil. They worship this knower of secret things, this conjurer of good familiars with complete and utter loyalty. There's nothing they wouldn't do in service to this king. And in fitting with the inevitability of Paimon and the Graham's demise, the film ends to the perfect score, Reborn. The tone perfectly encapsulates the combination of regal elegance and hauntingly sinister despair. A twisted piece to reflect both the triumph of the Demon King Paimon, alongside the tragedy that befell the Graham family and the impending chaos now unleashed. You can also hear, within the track, the playing of trumpets and cymbals to reflect the spirits preceding King Paimon as he finally journeys into this world, which just adds the eeriness of the scene. Just as the cult of Paimon reject the Trinity, Paimon invokes his own sick and twisted Trinity in the form of his own method of possession, the inevitability of his reign and the corruption of an innocent family, to finally claim his coveted male host and walk this earth as one of 8 kings of hell. And we're left to ponder the tragedy of the Graham family, and whether another unknown family already has this same hellish fate sealed, they just don't even know it yet.